Hi again then guys, and welcome to another special projects custom build on Gran Turismo 6, and this particular custom is one of those vehicles, like some others that we've done before, which could have happened in real life. It's not too far-fetched an idea, but it just so happens that it didn't occur that way. Now the Viper of course no longer exists, it's not a production car anymore. If you didn't already know that, then I'm sorry for you to know that now, because it's kind of a shame that the Viper doesn't have a production run anymore. I personally think it will come back at some point, but we'll have to see. This particular build though is inspired by other SRT models, as the name suggests, and it's a concept of what a car like this could have been like. Now what I've done is I've taken the essential idea of a Hellcat version, such as of the Challenger and the Charger in particular, and then wondered, well, what could a Viper have been like? Were there a Hellcat version? That's the point of this tune. Now as far as the visuals, I've actually left it totally stock. You do have some options. You can change the rims, you can even change the wing mirrors on this car, you could change the colour. Incidentally, speaking of the colour, I've left it striker red, which is actually the red that comes with the car, and the reason why I did that is A, I didn't want stripes, and B, I wanted it to look like other Hellcat models, and the most common colour for Hellcats to be seen, especially in promotional images, is red. Of course you see the Challenger sometimes in that lime green, but red is kind of the known colour for the Hellcat models, so that's the main reason why I did that. But feel free to change it of course if you want to. So for the visuals I've literally left it totally stock, and incidentally, and very importantly as well actually, this particular build is one of the relatively few special projects that I've done which does not have an oil change. So to do this in the exact same way that I have, I would recommend doing it to a brand new, totally untouched Viper. Don't even do the oil change, because if you have already done it, the specs that you will have will be slightly different to mine. You'll have to adjust your power limiter, etc. in slightly different ways, which is different, but that's just the way I've done it with this particular car. It doesn't kill the concept if you've already done the oil change, but I just recommend not doing it if you want to get it exactly lined up with what I've done. Now we don't need to cover the visuals because, as I said, it's stock, so we'll go first of all to the mechanical side of things, and then of course take it out to a track. Now with this particular tune, I did want to make the car, if possible, rounded off, PP wise. I always like to, if it's not too much trouble, and with this particular car it's not particularly difficult to get it rounded off to 585 PP, while simultaneously having believable Hellcat specs, and we'll get more into those specs in just a second. Now I've gone for sport soft tyres, because of course being a street fictional production vehicle you don't want it to be too grippy. It's not a race car after all. Likewise with the brakes, we've left those stock. For the suspension I've dropped the ride height a little bit, about 17mm to 110 front and rear. Springs we've slightly stiffened up to 7 and 775. The dampers and anti-roll I've left on 3, which is still higher than the stock numbers. Neutral camber and tow, although I know some of you guys like to have some camber, so feel free to do that if you want to. As far as the gearbox, I've opted, not too surprisingly for this one, to leave it stock. And the main reason for that, well actually there's two main reasons. One is because the stock gearbox has smoother, more almost automatic style gear changes, which just feels better when you're driving what's supposed to feel like a real car. And also the second reason, kind of more importantly, is that the race gearbox gives you straight cut gears, and as such it makes the car whine a little bit too much. Now it is a supercharged car, so that's not as much of an issue, but still I didn't want that to be there. If you want to change the gears, feel free to do so. I've just personally opted not to. As far as the diff, I've opted for the lowest initial torque, the highest acceleration, and the lowest braking. But as always, I would definitely recommend changing that around. If you already have numbers that you know suit you, then by all means go for those. Or if you just want to play around and find what is better for you, maybe to make the car more tail happy or quicker around the track. Now as far as the power, as I said, we have not done an oil change on this one, but what we have done is I've fitted the sports exhaust, which I know some of you guys don't like to do that, so if you don't want to, obviously fit something else and then use the power limiter, but I've fitted the sports exhaust, of course the supercharger, that's appropriate to a Hellcat model, and also, well actually no, that's it, I was going to say the intake, but I haven't fitted the intake. And as far as the weight, we have given it some weight loss, and partially that was to do with the PP. I wanted to round it up if at all possible, but I wanted to also keep the weight realistic. And I thought to myself, how could I do that? Because obviously you don't want to make it a super light, especially considering that the real life Hellcat models are heavier than the normal SRT versions of their respective cars, such as the Challenger and the Charger. But my reasoning on that was they're not going to make a Viper heavier. Giving it more power, given that it is a Viper, isn't that difficult. It's certainly not as major a change as it is for a Charger or a Challenger. So I personally believe that had SRT made a Viper Hellcat, I think that like the ACR, they would have made it lighter. Now maybe I'm wrong, but that's just the way I've gone with it. And of course, if you don't want to do that, just opt not to. I've given it the stage 1 weight reduction though. And then as far as the ballast, I've added 113 kilos. I've left it in the middle because it's got a perfect 50-50 split and there's no real need to change that. Now as it happens, we've only dropped the weight by about 60 kilos, which is reasonable. That's doable for a production car, especially something which is already an exotic. You've got room to play around with the weight. But overall that's it for the build. So it's not an extreme build. I wanted to keep it realistic, but also make the car feel more impressive than it already was. And it is. It's more powerful, it's lighter, it's supercharged like an actual Hellcat. So the question is, how does it perform? Well, let's go out to Laguna Seca to find out. Now, in real life, of course, the Hellcat variants of the Charger, the Challenger, etc. are more extreme. They're more tail-happy, they shred their tyres more than the normal versions of those cars. With a Viper, based on the way the Viper production run has gone, I don't think SRT would have gone as crazy. I don't think they would have developed a Hellcat Viper to make it worse around corners. Being a Viper, and being how good the Viper already is around the track, kind of ironically so given how much of a hot rod it is at heart, I believe they would have made it better around the track. And as such, I didn't want it to just be a car with rampant wheel spin that's sideways all the time. That being said, with the setup that I'm using, you can get the car to corner quickly if you want to, but then all you need to do to get the tail out is give it a little bit too much throttle and you get a nice little controlled drift, in a similar way to my BMW 1M replica build. So overall, if you do decide to use this tune, or of course some variation of it, I hope you find it fun, potentially useful for racing or seasonals if you do decide to use it for that, but first and foremost, fun. So if you are new to the channel and you'd like to see other tunes like this, you can of course subscribe down below, but for now, as always, thanks for watching.